It's one of the greatest mysteries in human history. For centuries, people have been scratching their heads asking, how exactly did the pyramids get here? Nowadays, with the good old internet, everybody has a theory. From human slavery to alien civilizations, the theories couldn't be more broad. Well, today, we may actually have the answer. Welcome back to Curiosity, and today we'll be talking about how the Egyptian pyramids were actually built. What technology did they use? Who oversaw the construction? We're talking about all of that and more, so stay tuned. Egypt has over 100 pyramids, so let's get specific and talk about the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's the oldest and largest of the world's pyramids located in Giza. For those of you who are confused, Giza is a city in Upper Egypt located on the west bank of the River Nile, southwest of Cairo. While so many of the details behind its construction are still shrouded in mystery, we do know this much. The Great Pyramid was constructed at the order of Pharaoh Khufu sometime around 2560 BC. That's right, this structure was built over 4,500 years ago, and you thought your property gained value with age. Khufu was the Pharaoh of Egypt around 2500 BC, also known as Cheops. The greatest piece of his legacy was overseeing the construction of this monstrous structure. The purpose of the pyramids to begin with was to serve as tombs for the ancient pharaohs once they died. Khufu constructed the largest for himself. Imagine the ego of this guy. Compensating much? While you can't help but marvel at his empire's achievements, Khufu was far from heroic. Historical findings have found him to be rather cruel. He used his own tribes of African pygmies to keep him entertained, along with a large group of concubines. In other words, the guy had a lot of mistresses. Again, compensating much? So how the heck were the pyramids built? Well, like I said earlier, many of the details are still a mystery, but researchers have been able to put the pieces together from research and historical expeditions. Over the years, archaeologists have continued to discover tools and mechanisms the Egyptians used to make these gigantic structures. When you hear what exactly went into making them, you won't believe it. The idea that human beings pulled this off with inferior technology is enough to make your head spin. For just the Great Pyramid alone, it took approximately 5.5 million tons of limestone, 8,000 tons of granite, and 500,000 tons of mortar. According to Egyptologists, the granite was transported from over 800 kilometers away. From what we know, the limestone blocks that we use came from a quarry which had to be brought over to the site. As you can imagine, this wasn't so simple. There weren't just fragments of limestone lying around for the taking. Even if there were, moving them was impossible without some type of system. The blocks first had to be carefully mined, and then transported from the quarry back to the building site. The quarry was 15 kilometers downriver from Giza. This meant that all those tons of limestone had to be transported across the desert. If I was to describe the process of transporting the stone, the word challenge would be an understatement. While experts have gone back and forth as to how exactly they were carried, most have come to the conclusion that a ramp of some sort would have been used. The logistics behind such a ramp have been debated, with some believing that even with something like this, it still would have been too hard to transport the stone. You see, each piece of stone weighed an estimated 2.5 tons. To make things easier, researchers have suggested that workers may have wet the sand before transporting. This would have made it at least a little easier to transport the limestone, but still leave some questions unanswered. How could they have successfully removed the stone from the quarry without the help of modern technology? Surely space aliens had to have been involved, right? Well, We're not going to take it there today. Sorry, UFO fanatics. That's a topic for a whole other video. Instead, a much more sophisticated ramp may have existed. This ramp was suggested by archaeologists during a dig at Hatnub, a quarry located in Egypt's eastern desert. French explorers discovered a ramp carved into the ground. Not only was the ramp much steeper than the ones previously seen, it also appeared to have staircases built. The researchers dated this ramp back to about 4,500 years ago. This matches with the time the pyramids were built. Another researcher also saw that there were once holes in the stairs. This means there was probably a rope and pulley system installed. As for the number of workers it took to bring these tombs to life, well, the exact amount has been disputed over the centuries. A Greek historian named Herodotus wrote that the ancient pyramids were completed on the backs of over 100,000 workers. Since then, that number has shrunk dramatically. Modern Egyptologists suggest the number was closer to about 20,000, while other sources suggest a labor force of around 36,000. The 100,000 figure supposedly came from something Herodotus was told. The word was that there were 100,000 men working in 3 shifts. It's unclear as to whether there were 3 shifts of 100,000 each, or 100,000 workers divided over 3 shifts. Let's just go with the 20,000 figure. These workers would have been divided up into certain job titles. The Great Pyramid of Giza would have required about 4,000 primary laborers consisting of masons, quarry workers, and hauliers. An additional 16,000 served as ramp building, mortar mixers, and tool makers. Many others would have been used to provide fuel, clothing, and food. Food workers included bakers and brewers. Over the 20-year period it took to build the Great Pyramid, these workers lived with their families in something called a pyramid village. They were said to have worked in shifts spanning 3 to 4 months. Now, with all this said, you're probably wondering, how many workers died building the pyramids? I mean, it clearly wasn't a picnic for these people. Just like the number of workers themselves, the number who died varies depending on who you ask. Since it was so long ago, it's impossible to know exactly how many workers perished during construction. Needless to say, building the pyramids was probably one of the more dangerous tasks you could take part in. They didn't exactly have strong workers' unions back in those days. According to scholars, men were forced to work at a rapid rate. Since the Great Pyramid was meant to be 481 feet high, workers were required to set one stone on top of the other every 2 to 3 minutes. It's estimated that it took around 2.3 million blocks to build the entire pyramid. While many of the workers were paid craftsmen, some experts suggested that the body of workers was mostly comprised of slaves, who were forced to work for hours on end. We'll get to this in a moment. Due to the intensity of the job, many of these laborers broke their backs, along with other bones. And yes, stones and equipment definitely fell on people. Depending on the size of these objects, their deaths may not have been as quick as you'd think. An average age of the workers who died was between 30 to 35. Compare that to members of Egyptian high society who usually died between 50 and 60. Archaeologists digging around Giza have discovered the burial grounds of hundreds of workers over the years. Many of these workers were revealed to have deformed bones and broken limbs. Were the workers actually slaves? One of the greatest disputes among modern historians had been whether or not the pyramid workers were in fact slaves. Like I said, the perception has always been that the pyramid workers were forced to work against their will and treated unfairly by employers. Some suggest that the laborers who worked on the structures were not only paid, but also housed and fed by their employers. This might surprise you. It certainly surprises me. But when you think about it, it does make some sense. Since building the Great Pyramid was such a huge undertaking with lots of risk, the Egyptians probably wanted to make sure that their workers had some incentive to keep going. Also, this job was pretty physically demanding. They probably wanted to make sure the workers had the proper nourishment. There are even claims that many of these workers were in fact volunteers, who were happy just to contribute to their pharaoh's vision. Take this for example. During the late summer and early fall season, the Nile River would flood, with many nearby fields overwhelmed by water. As a result, many of the farmers were left with no work and unable to make a living. Instead of starving until the flooding receded, they would head to Giza to assist with pyramid construction. To the Egyptian people, this was seen as a great honor, as to give them a chance to pay tribute to the pharaohs while pleasing their gods. While there is no concrete evidence to support this claim, it definitely conflicts with the slave narrative. Now don't let this fool you. Slavery certainly did exist in Egypt as well as the rest of the ancient world. But historical findings have revealed that the vast majority of pyramid workers were paid livable wages. As if that wasn't enough to blow your mind, there is also reason to believe that some of the workers were given medical treatment for minor injuries. Now, it obviously wouldn't be the medical treatment we're used to today. They didn't exactly have x-rays and modern medication. But there is some evidence that employers did try to mend some of the workers' broken bones. The world is full of strange mysteries. The pyramids are just the tip of the iceberg. Let's keep the conversation going with a couple more curiosity videos, shall we? Here's what else might interest you. Check out What If Hiroshima and Nagasaki Were Never Bombed? You should also watch our video on How Hitler's Nephew Worked Against Him in World War II. Go ahead, click one, or better yet, watch both, and learn more about the craziness of history.